The opinions expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
This is the Anime Roundtable Canada on this Saturday evening, January 22nd, 2022. You can contact us online on the web, animeroundtable.com, Twitter and Instagram at Anime Roundtable, and email animeroundtable@gmail.com. Good evening from Toronto. Mike Nicolas, James Austin, Kevin Ng, Mohamed Sharmarke, and Geoff Greig in a fully roundtable tonight for the first time in 2022. So, much to talk about, and let's get right to it. And we're going to start this week with a little bit of breaking news, as breaking news gets on a podcast. As we mentioned, we are starting to tape this in the evening on January 22nd. Earlier today, this afternoon, I believe around noon, Anime North announced that they're pushing back the big show this year from their traditional last weekend of May, from the May 27th to 29th date, and they're going to push it back almost 2 months to the middle of July 15th to the 17th. We're going to read the statement in full here. While the current situation with COVID-19 has been worrisome, we still plan to hold Anime North 2022 to allow the current wave to completely subside and to take advantage of the better summer weather. We will be moving from our usual weekend date at the end of May to July 15th to 17th. This date change is for this year only. We expect to return to our regular date in 2023. We are currently planning around the assumption that our venues will be under 50% capacity limit, which will require us to have an attendance cap. Attendings, as well as staff and vendors, should also plan on having to wear masks and be fully vaccinated as required by the province of Ontario. If these requirements are relaxed, we will make announcements on how this will impact the convention policies this year. To give time for the word to get out, we will be delaying registration opening until Tuesday, March the 1st, 2022. A follow-up announcement will be coming in early February with admission prices and the size of the attendance cap. The room blocks at our partner hotels will also be opening March 1st, and information on roommates will be made available in advance. All currently purchased admissions will be honored, and updated registration emails will be sent out prior to the convention. If you have an already purchased admission and cannot attend these new dates, please contact registration@animenorth.com for a rollover or refund. Information about registering as a vendor, whether in the vendors hall, comics market, crafters corner, etc., will also be updated in February. You can also join us online May 28th, 2022 for another streaming event. Details to be released. We believe that this date change will be much in the convention favor and allow us to bring back the Anime North experience after a long enforced break. We look forward to seeing you at the convention this year in July. In 2020, I remember they tried to do... What was it 2020 or was it last year?
It was last year, 2021.
And then that was canceled, and then they had the online edition, right? That's how it ended up going.
Correct. And I think this weekend is probably similar to what we heard about last year, because I think this is the only other weekend that would have been available for the convention center, the hotels, and Anime North. And it gives them breathing room for all of them. And I think they said everyone's on board with this change because it just makes sense in this climate, because they don't know how this is all going to shake out, right?
So maybe we shouldn't have been too surprised, especially with how the Omicron wave is going, and we get it. There's a lot of numbers. Frankly, there's been deaths, but there's a sense of been there, done that. What is the feeling around this table right now as this announcement settled in? Because you guys, as members of various organizing branches within AN, got wind of this, I'm sure, before much of the general public did. Is there a thought around the table?
I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If it happens, it happens, man.
The capacity
James?
cap is for the best too.
And not everyone will be able to make probably the mid-July date as they said and stuff like that. And it's been a while, so it's like I'm sure if some people they want to come, they're going to try to make it out. But things change over 2 years for staff and for people attending the conventions too, right? Because people's lives change and they go to different events or gravitate to different things. So hopefully that'll help them too. But I still think whatever the cap's going to be, 50%, I think that would be the smartest thing to just keep in place so that they can have the distancing and make everyone feel safe. And they'll probably still hit that no problem, I figure.
It'll be tested, I think. For reference, and yes, we are rolling this as part of a COVID update. The province is set to do a careful reopening again beginning on January 31st. So places that had been shut down will be allowed to reopen at 50% capacity. Large scale sports venues, casinos, gyms, restaurants,
Movie
or indoor
theaters.
dining. Movie theaters, yes, Mo. I know you'd be paying attention to that one.
I don't know if he's going to be running to the movie theaters, but
Well, okay, what's the over-under on that, Mo?
I mean, I'm pretty sure something will be out, but I mean, it's like I feel like it might be too soon with the reopenings. Like I feel like we're all gearing up, and then like bam, something else is gonna happen, and we're gonna have to shut down again. I feel like we might be going a little too fast, guys.
You think it could be that again?
I mean, I don't know, man. We've been on this roller coaster ride for a while now. I mean, you never know.
Yes, we have.
different provinces have been cautiously watching each other. I know others are taking the more cautious approach. And so there's no right or wrong answers, right? It's just got to go with the flow.
You understand. We've been through this for almost 2 years now. For reference, this episode, and I know we don't number the episodes in the introduction anymore, but this is episode 60 of the version 2 era. For reference, the pandemic series of episodes, we started all the way back, I believe it was episode 18 or 19. So in the pandemic series, we have done 40 plus official episodes and a handful of other tapings to go with it. That's how much we've put out on this podcast over the last almost 2 years. Yeah, I guess that's where the whole battle hardened and been there, done that feeling kind of starts to settle in. And when I say same song and dance in relation to reading out the Anime North news, this is not meant as a shot to Anime North or anybody, any person. Yeah, we're tired of this. And this is sort of routine as well. But, you know, there's a you know what to do type attitude here too. And or rather, you know what to expect, which is still the unexpected at this stage.
I feel like the date choice was, smart for a lot of reasons. Like I believe by that point in the year, unless there's another sort of surprise, variant, based off of, what we saw last year and based off of other, um, similar infectious, pandemics and epidemics and things like that, I feel that things will probably be better in July again, unless there is another, sudden variant, which is a possibility. But I'm willing to stay hopeful there that there won't be another new one. I am I as hopefully I've mentioned on this podcast before, like I adore Anime North. Like it is my Christmas. Highlight of my year. Slightly frustrated because this is about the third event who has rescheduled for pretty much that weekend, at least personally. They're not major events, just things, other, gatherings and events that, I was going to attend in December to March, and now, 3 of them are in the same weekend. But, not much can be done there. I'll have to navigate my own heart. But I think that the biggest change for me regarding it happening in the middle of July is, as someone who has done cosplay every year, at least since my second or third year going at Anime North, it kind of, to me, I mean, people cosplay in warmer climates than Toronto, but Anime North has been end of May, which is fairly different temperature-wise than the middle of July. So I'm imagining we're going to see less fursuits, less mascot costumes, less bulky armor, and more, I guess what you would call standard cosplay, or less cosplay that won't have people overheat. I am also hopeful that, again, this is purely personal, that Splatoon 3 will release sometime, giving me enough time to see if there's any costumes from that that I might want to do, because I don't have many ideas other than that.
Splatoon 2 group shoot a few years ago, and I stumbled onto that one. That was a great group shoot of Splatoon 2. Oh, man.
Yeah, I was probably there. I saw you filming in one of those shoots, anyways, or photographing.
Well, no, I just sent that to our Splatoon Discord.
I distinctly remember you. I don't know if you recognize me, but I distinctly remember you because the prop I built was an aerospray, and you made a comment because I guess that weapon was very popular in the meta at the time. I play very casually. But yeah,
I don't think it was popular, I think, with the casual folks, but I would say I'm not playing at a level that the people that play all the time. Those guys can do things that just boggle the mind. So it'll be interesting to see how the third game turns out, and hopefully it'll come out this year. And as you said, if it comes out before, that'll be a fun summer game and a fun thing to cosplay as too for the summer. You do something like that.
Yeah, so I'm hoping if it comes out in May or June, it gives me a month, to figure out something. But yeah, I think that would be interesting. I am curious how the temperature is going to change things. That little creek is going to maybe be harder to jump over with a little bit more plant growth.
Oh, that's the other thing in the announcement that we kind of missed, and I thought it was mentioned somewhere when they were letting other people know, maybe just a tiny bit before they made this announcement, is warmer weather. So that will hopefully give them the ability to put, if fingers crossed on the weather, because Mother Nature can be unpredictable, but they can use those spots where they had raves and other things and maybe turn them into other sites for other events to allow distancing in other places and stuff like that. So it opens up a lot of things for them if the weather is good for outdoor events.
The weather is, I know, just a casual read of the comments was some of the reaction on Facebook. And not all of it was positive.
Too hot, they were thinking, for some people?
Yeah. And then one person just reminded them, well, it's either this or not at all.
I was thinking it's this, or you could be in Japan, and I hear it's even worse there sometimes for summer.
I don't know. People go to Fan Expo in late August, early September, and it's usually pretty hot then too. So I don't see what the difference is.
I think
Well,
last year it was. I don't think last year it actually was as hot, but there were more rainy days. I felt last year during the summer, but it wasn't as hot. It was a little more cool. But you never know, right?
You know, it always depends, right? Like every year you get different results when it comes to the weather. It's gonna be in roughly that same range. I feel like I don't think it's something you can really complain about. Well, it is, but I think the date change is a little more justifiable when it comes to a complaint, but like we said, like it's either this or you don't get an event. And personally, I don't know if I'll go because it's really going to depend on how the pandemic situation will be like. And I say this as a person who likes to go every year for my own reasons. Like I like to sell at Nominoichi. I like to attend panels. I like to catch up with friends that I see once a year at these events. So
yeah, there's a truth with that last one.
so then it's just, it's I probably won't be deciding until much closer to the date is what I'm thinking.
Although at that point, it may not be an option if there's an attendance cap.
Hard to
Well,
say
there's always
because
ways
I think
around
a lot
it.
of y'all.
Oh yeah,
As a person who shouldn't be saying this because, we're the official podcast of Anime North, like you can go to the con and not have a badge. You just can't go to certain parts of the con.
basically inside.
You can't go into the main convention hall.
Yes, but you can walk through the hotel.
Yeah.
Right. You just can't get into the ballrooms.
They probably
Oh,
might
but it's
check a
true.
few things on the outside more this year if they're going to move some events outside too. So I
I
guess
wouldn't be
time will tell.
surprised.
But some people, we'll see how it is because I'm sure some people will be of the same thought process, right, Kevin? So you never really know until we see how
No,
the tickets go and how many people accept the rollovers.
I always like to say if you're thinking it, everybody else is thinking it.
Moving the convention to July also, I mean, I know that right now it seems pretty likely there'll be an attendance cap, but I think pushing it to July gives more chance for that attendance cap to be loosened in some ways, because I imagine a lot of the vendors are not going to be happy with 50% attendance because that's 50% less customers. And for some of them, it may not be worth it. Like despite kind of being the area of Anime North I'm a part of, I don't really know how much, these cost. I mean, I have access to that information, but I don't particularly care, to be honest, right now.
Well, I'm sure that line just as much applies to the restaurants that
Yeah.
will be dotting Dixon and an airport as well.
And trying to distance all those people in those type of places, whether it's restaurants or even the dealer's room. And we heard other conventions that had in person, like Otakon, and some people said it felt like they didn't do enough to distance in places like the dealer's room and stuff like that. Like it was almost like normal. So
And I
it's going
think
to be a tough question to answer, especially for both sides. Even the dealers, I think, would want to know how that would work.
exactly. And um, I don't think we have those answers yet. And sadly, I don't think we'll have them in time. I think that a lot of people, whether attendees or dealers or other types of exhibitors, um, volunteers and staff, even, I think, we're all going to have to make the decision based off of the information we have right now, which is, weekend of July 15th, 50% capacity, masks, vaccinations, all that, even if there's a possibility, and hopefully a probability, I don't want to completely go that route, but that things will be loosened at least somewhat by July. So it becomes this probably a gamble for a lot of people, which is interesting.
Yeah, think of it as crypto.
Okay. We'll get to that later, though. Mo, is there anything else you want to add? You had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add on what Geoff said. I mean, let's think a bit on the bright side, man. I mean, right now it's 50% capacity, right? So if you're a vendor and you're thinking to yourself, man, let's have the customers. But at the same time, come July, if all restrictions are done, if like we're truly out of this pandemic and we can like bump it up to 100%, I mean, that's half the vendors, I'm assuming. They're not going to have the same amount of vendors. So it's like, you're basically doubling your audience at that point.
And these people are going to be excited to be at a convention and likely more likely to purchase things and to have like even a simple memento of
cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Completely irrelevant.
Not the crypto thing, but that's what I'm thinking too. That the people that are going to be attending are more likely to spend money. I think that's a good predictor. It's a good prediction.
And a lot of those vendors, like they've been through a lot, as we said, some setting up their online shops, and it takes a lot of different skill sets to find those customers and get those sales in one area than the other. So this will be something where they said, I want to actually go and engage with my customers, and I'm likely to make more sales of what I want. You know what I mean? In that one weekend, even if it's 50%.
And as always, set yourself up later on. Okay.
And you never know, you can do your marketing too and say, hey, come to my website and stuff like that you had already set up and stuff like that. So
basically,
it's another opportunity, right?
That's what I was thinking. On a personal level, and I guess my own take on this before we move on, and I think we've said enough already, and for sure we'll say more on Anime North before, like, in the months ahead. Especially as we start to learn a few more details about what could happen there. On a personal level, I'm actually okay with it. Mainly because I found out this week one of my cousins intends to get married officially now on May 28th. I was told to save the date during the Christmas holidays by my uncle. But now my cousin did send out a message to his extended family to officially save the date. So maybe this might not be a bad thing on a personal level and maybe in the grand scheme. And it's something to think about. And the worst case scenario is on the 28th, regardless, you'll hear from Anime North, even if it is online. I guess we won't be able to do a podcast, will we? If I'm at a wedding?
Not with that attitude.
What you can get done at a wedding, Mike. Don't worry about it.
Well, who knows? I mean, as I said, as we've constantly talked about over the last 20 minutes, can't predict it. We can't predict any part of this, so.
It's like the one article you were talking about with us last week that we'll probably get to another time about predictions. You never know where they're going to shake out, right?
Right. Okay. So let's get down to the more major stuff that happened this week. Now James was referring to the Project Anime article. A year ago we did talk about their predictions, and they did do a 2022 version of their predictions for the anime and manga industry. And I know we'll talk in some form about that, but obviously there's another big story that happened earlier this week. How do you want to start this conversation, James? Where do you want to start this conversation?
Yeah.
Do we
Well, it was interesting, just to end off just quickly on what you said that we'll talk about later, maybe about the Project Anime, is they had some interesting things that kind of drive in these other stories. And it's interesting, they talk about, one of the analysts talk about audio novels and stuff like that, and we've talked about that, and we're talking about cinema. The other thing is China, and that was interesting because you think about Tencent buying up certain video game publishers and stuff like that, but some of it kind of makes more sense now because China has put the gears back on anime and video game and other things coming into their country. So to survive, some of these companies need to look outside and look globally to get content to earn money and stuff like that. And it's an interesting thing to see how that'll continue this year. But there was another, as you said, big consolidation in the video game industry. No one quite expected. And I guess in 90s jargon, Mike, I think I can tell you something about this console generation. That is, we're on the losing side. Your PS5 that you supposedly bought has no value. I would take that out to your balcony now and just throw it into the snowdrift.
No, just leave it out there, man.
No one's going to take it, Mo. They're
Kevin-
useless. All the scalpers, they lost. They lost. It's all Xbox.
Microsoft on Tuesday announced their intention to purchase Activision Blizzard for, according to Gizmodo,
$68.7 billion
yes,
cash.
billion
They
with
just had that cash right just somewhere in a vault.
Let's not forget it's Microsoft. They're like a 3, 4, $10 trillion company.
Well,
they have an unlimited amount of money. So it's
from what I've heard, it was significant even for Microsoft. I think, as far as, let's call it their war chest, I think it was about half. Like from what I think this might have been an IGN podcast, but yeah, I think it was significant. It wasn't just we have this huge Microsoft is the biggest ever. It was nothing to them. This is going to be a risk.
This is a big play for all of Microsoft, as you said, and you look at their other acquisitions, and even Sony and even Nintendo, because they've all been doing acquisitions over the past couple of years. They were studios that they had been working for them on exclusive games or things like that. So they were already in the ecosystem and just bought them to bring them on and stuff like that. The one outlier, of course, was ZeniMax with Bethesda and stuff like that, which is closed for Microsoft. But now you add this on and it's just another stratosphere. But even if you look at other acquisitions for Microsoft over the last decade, you looked at LinkedIn, you look at the other ones they tried to do, like Discord and so on and so forth. Like this still dwarfs all of them. It's ridiculous to think that no one would have thought a video game acquisition would have dwarfed those type of deals, right?
Yeah. Okay, which angles do you want to start with on this story? Do you want to talk about the risk? Do you want to?
I think it's where it came from, because I think it wasn't like they were probably talking for a long time, because I figure it would have leaked out. I think that, like a lot of people have been saying, it came together relatively quickly with the troubles at Blizzard and Activision for that company and for Bobby Kotick and stuff like that. I think there was blood in the water. I think, as we said, the value was going down. It obviously didn't go down that much. God only knows how much they would be valued if they were actually somewhat competent. But that basically gave them an edge to say, hey, we'll make this deal. And then I don't think Bobby Kotick had enough cachet with his board of directors, even though they quote unquote had his support. And remember, Activision was kind of his baby and stuff like that. That basically they were saying, okay, we should take this deal for the shareholders and so on and so forth. And as we said, depends on if this goes through, likely probably will go through the FTC and all the regulatory process, I figure, just like we've seen before. But I'd say for some people, yes, Bobby Kotick, his days will be numbered once they become a part of Microsoft and they appoint, well, we already know who they're going to appoint. I should remember his name, and it's terrible. I forget his name.
What?
Phil Spencer? Are we talking Phil Spencer here?
Phil Spencer, yeah. Phil Spencer will take over as CEO and stuff like that. But
for Kotick,
the unfortunate thing is Bobby Kotick won't have his comeuppance. He's going to get his golden parachute, and I was just going to ask. He's going to go and make Moneyball 2 with Brad Pitt, I guess, after he's done on his yacht or something.
I was just going to ask what carrot you think his golden parachute was going to be.
Oh yeah, it's a carrot size.
Oh boy.
Well, let's roll back that thought for a couple seconds, because you can start to connect some of the dots in some of what Microsoft publicly said about the whole Activision Blizzard situation, or more specifically, what Phil Spencer said. He expressed concern, but wouldn't throw Kotick under the bus.
And that's
And
because they're still in the acquisition period.
because they were in
You
the
know what I mean? Like they can't.
want to basically butter them up, and plus maybe it would just look weird, wouldn't it? At least weird.
And the other thing is, all of the stuff about exit packages and stuff like that is all public knowledge. So he's going to get something regardless. So they have to pay the man, unfortunately, whether you like it or not. And
go ahead.
I was just thinking, it's like with the efforts in that of the different studios. I'm not saying Microsoft is going to be the saving angel and stuff like that, but I think hopefully those employees at a lot of the studios will be in a better place. The other thing is, many people said, is a lot of these studios hopefully will stop being sent to the COD salt mines, as they say, like Games for Bob and stuff like that, after they tried to do Crash Bandicoot and some other things in other studios, and hopefully they'll be able to spread their wings to different projects, because Microsoft has allowed some of their studios to do different things. They've allowed Rare to, even though it isn't the Rare we grew up and loved, they let them do what they want to do. They let them to continue on to do Sea of Thieves, even though it wasn't doing the greatest after launch, and now they're at 25 million players. So they're going to allow those teams maybe to try different things and let them grow their projects and their passions, and maybe hopefully stop doing COD every single year. Like maybe make it something a little more special and use that tech in other ways across their brands.
Okay, so you mentioned COD. You mentioned I do want to roll back one other thing in the whole, whatever bargaining power or the value, and possibly going, why Microsoft? Because they did ask, apparently Kotick did ask at least Meta, and there didn't seem to be any interest in anybody else. Okay, so since you brought up COD, possibility of IPs, of the most popular IPs that are on multi-platforms, possibility that they become exclusive to Xbox and PC, away from.
I think we've seen that they're going to keep them. If they see the value in keeping them multi-platform, that's the benefit of them going to Microsoft, because we saw it with Minecraft, because Minecraft is still everywhere. And Microsoft is happy with that, and they're still making their money, right?
I'm of the belief it could be a case by case, but is there a dissenting
And
thought?
even COD, the change might be PlayStation, like once that one contract lapses, they'll allow Microsoft to actually get the DLC day and date at the same time, because remember, PlayStation had the exclusivity that they would get the DLC first or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't this mutually assured destruction between Microsoft and Sony if they start this exclusive bullshit?
How so?
I mean, there's exclusive Sony titles they can be are no longer allowed on Xboxes and vice versa.
That's how it already is, though.
Yeah.
And I mean, more exclusive, because then, Sony will buy something else and they'll buy something else, and then it's just that arms race to see who can own every studio down.
There's nothing left for Sony
true.
to buy.
I mean, I wonder.
It depends. Sorry,
Well, Sony's already been doing that because they've been buying studios up too.
and a
initially,
lot of them were ones.
initially Naughty Dog.
With.
Like Naughty Dog was a third-party studio at one point, but then Sony ended up just buying them out.
I was thinking more recent ones like Blue Point and stuff like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, so.
What did Blue Point make?
Oh, they were the remaster studios doing a lot of remasters for PlayStation
Oh, I
of
see.
some of their older games and that. And they did, I think Blue Point was the one, or is another one they bought up that did the Dark Souls remake for PS5.
Okay.
But I will say on exclusivity, we better put a quick caveat on that one. And that is changed now, because both Sony and Microsoft, as well as releasing on their home consoles, they've also been doing PC as well. And Microsoft has been moving away from just saying, we want you on the Xbox and stuff like that. They're looking at the bigger picture with their Xbox Game Pass and at other devices and stuff like that. So they're playing a whole different kettle of fish. It's funny, the old exclusive argument we make, the only one I can think of now in that pond now is Nintendo with their games. If you want to play a Nintendo game, a Mario, a Zelda, Splatoon, whatever, you got to go to them.
I'm sort of in agreement here. It's because there's this argument that console exclusivity is becoming a bit passé, especially when you start to think that companies do not make the money off of the consoles, off the hardware. It's the software. That's been a thought for at least a decade, probably further. At least since the PS3 era, or at least in my mind, when I realized that concept, or when it really started to stick out to me. So I think I could believe the idea that when it comes to what Microsoft will do, it'll always come down to what's best for business, what will make them the most money or most recognition.
And I think it's a long game play for Games Pass because they have all the cachet now and they want to be the front runner, kind of the Netflix of games, so to speak, and they want those guys on their team. And this was the best time to strike when Activision Blizzard was at their weakest.
Mm-hmm. Spencer, for his part, has done a couple of interviews, and remember, over the last couple of years, there's been a healthy public show of respect between Sony and Microsoft for their spaces in the video game industry.
And Nintendo as well, since I know that Phil Spencer and them have worked getting things onto the Switch as well, things like that. Yeah, Banjo-Kazooie just this week.
There is a healthy respect, and Spencer, for his part, has always said they will do what's right for the industry. He's not, and I think in a Wall Street Journal interview this week, just after the announcement, he seemed to voice his concern about letting other names like the Googles, like the Metas, etc., like the Netflixes, really start to get into the game space because that's not their core. That's not what they're about. They're about other things. And it doesn't sound like he thinks much of them in terms of the way they would get into games, because I guess to him, they don't get it. Sony gets it. Nintendo gets it. Because that's increasingly their core stuff.
I guess Alphabet and Google has already been answered to a degree, Mike, because they tried to come in trumpets blazing on Stadia. And we saw how that all kind of turned out. It didn't quite turn out like they hoped. And who knows whether that's a lesson for Amazon, Netflix, and others. But
and Apple,
it's not as simple. Yeah, and Apple. But Apple Arcade supposedly has been making headway and stuff like that. And we know a lot of people, unlike ourselves, which are probably thought of as older and physical media, games on a CD and things like that. And there's a lot of people on the mobile devices still. And even that's where a lot of them are in China. And we may not look at gacha games and all those other type of things as a game, but they do have a lot of eyeballs on them and people still play them. And I guess they still make enough money that they still are a thing to be reckoned with in certain markets.
Don't you feel old, James?
Well, I hate to tell you, it was funny too. Did you guys see the announcement, of course, the tweet from both Xbox and Activision Blizzard? They had the same reel of games, like picture of games across, where it had like the Xbox plus Activision Blizzard King. And it kind of tells you about which series are most important. And so they only had one from King and one from Activision. So Call of Duty was Activision, Candy Crush was King, and then the other four were all Blizzard. It was Overwatch, Diablo, Warcraft, and StarCraft. That definitely tells you what they're looking at in value too.
Well, that's also because Blizzard is the closest thing that, that entire mega company has to having anything iconic. Like, I know this has been said multiple times, but or I'm sure it has, but Nintendo is the one who has mascots and recognizable IPs. Like, Call of Duty is wildly popular, but there's no Mr. Call of Duty man that they could have crammed into Smash Brothers. Versus
there is no Master Chief.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can
Mhm.
put Tracer or what's his name, Thrall, or whatever Warcraft person you want. You could pull from StarCraft if you wanted, or even Lost Vikings or whatever. Like, Blizzard has things. So of course they're going to use Blizzard there. Although I guess now they could technically use Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, but those are, I guess, dead IPs.
And the good thing is, we said is they can actually take chances, and they'll maybe have more leeway to make those games compared to what they had before, instead of being sent to make the big game and stuff like that. Because it's not like you fail at something, they send you to the Halo salt mines or whatever.
Let's be careful about to your point about dead IPs. Bill Spencer, in talking with Washington Post, talks about bringing back some of the dead IPs. Guitar Hero, he mentioned, which I didn't know was in there. I forgot was in there. So Crash, Spyro could make a comeback. Oh God, could Pitfall come in? There's a name I wonder if you guys recognize.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, because remember, there were tons of PC games from the 90s from Activision that have just been mothballed for so long, and they're just begging for something to be done with them. And
what
if
are
they
you
find
going
the
to do
right
with
one,
Pitfall? How do you make that into 2022 cool game? Man, jump over holes.
I will tell you how. It's 3 special letters.
Gonna be son of.
Shut up, Mohamed.
next year, Geoff, if Sega can make the Sonic open world game, then hell, they can do something with Pitfall.
So
it's just going to be Uncharted then.
And that might have been that might have been one of Activision's early IPs, right? And at least it was big enough that they made a Saturday morning cartoon out of it in the 80s.
But no, that was a big game for a while before, like a few years. You think of Prince of Persia, and then Ubisoft brought it back, remember? So you could do things with them. It'll just be a different feel, right?
Kevin?
It's funny how Spyro and Crash Bandicoot used to be Sony IP, and now they've gone to the other side.
Well, we can say that about a lot of Rare IPs too.
Oh yeah, Nintendo does Microsoft, yeah.
It was a weird thing because remember, it was Vivendi Universal. That was with Naughty Dog, because they were on their lot doing the first 3 Crash games and those things. And then they had the deal with Sony for exclusivity. And then once that lapsed, and of course Naughty Dog was bought by Sony and stuff like that, they were still with Vivendi Universal. So that's when I guess they decided they found the success and said, hey, we should do it more with other companies as well. You know what I mean? That's
I always wondered. I always wondered if that was like I thought Naughty Dog sold the IP for those.
No, they might have had some like piece of the IP, possibly, but if they did, maybe some of it reverted back to Universal Vivendi, and they might have got some money back or something to that effect. You know what I mean?
So that's what it was. Interesting.
But it was a different kettle of fish compared to, say, Rare and Nintendo, where Rare helped Nintendo through that N64 era with those iconic games. And then the Stamper Brothers, I think they wanted it out, and they thought they were actually going to go and put Nintendo against other companies like Microsoft and stuff like that. And Nintendo, unlike with Next Level Games, where they bought them out this year, they decided they didn't want to buy out the Stamper Brothers and let Microsoft buy out their shares and Nintendo shares for Rare, and then all became history. And they've done some good things after that. It's like Sea of Thieves isn't my cup of tea, but I know people have enjoyed it where Rare is now, but it's a different Rare. But they did celebrate their history and had that one Rare collection where it looked at their full history. And I hope they do something like that maybe with Activision and some of those others, because that would
Rare
be a
Replay?
great... Yeah, Rare Replay, something like that maybe. Hopefully would be something nice to see out of this deal too later on, but who knows.
Wait, doesn't
Okay.
Rare Replay have Conker's Bad Fur Day on it?
Correct. The N64 version, might I add. Which is supposedly the least censored version compared to the Xbox version, which is hilarious.
You know, Rare Replay was one of the few reasons why I would have considered buying an Xbox, because I remember wanting to play Conker's Bad Fur Day for so long, only because I remember Conker's Pocket Tales for the Game Boy, and then all of a sudden Conker's Bad Fur Day came out, and then like 10-year-old me was just so shocked at why this like cute little squirrel game just suddenly became so dirty.
I loved playing that, like, because I was older, so I got to play and stuff like that. But it wasn't just about the irrelevant humor and stuff like that, but they needed something different. I know Chris Seaver and stuff like that that voiced Conquer and helped create the game. They had to make it different from Banjo-Kazooie, so they tossed out the cutie stuff and they went with a hard edge. But the other thing was they had the British humor, and even in the other games, they had that difference making in their characters and that Britishness that you don't normally see. And it always put a smile on my face because not everyone could get it. And somehow it still worked in North America and stuff like that. I'm not sure if people got it, but it was fun to
It was
play
in
and
a different
watch.
way. Okay.
But the last point thinking about this is one that I know you wanted to say, Mike, and that was esports. I think this is going to be a big boost because remember, they were down in the dumps with where they were for the scandals and things like that and sponsors stepping away. And I think they're going to have second thoughts because I think Microsoft will give them a big boost for esports, as we've talked about before.
Yeah, it's an intriguing part and not one I've really thought of. And maybe we can talk. People, there's others that I'm sure will address that, and I wish we could really talk to in the near future. I guess we'll just have to send out the invites to talk about that angle.
And
But
they
yeah,
and they probably have the relationships too, Microsoft, with different sports leagues, the right people, you know what I mean, to make it even bigger, whatever bigger means for esports, or to try to reach them in the way they think they can reach that generation, right? Because it's a different kettle of fish compared to a traditional sports fan, as you said, right?
Well, the thing is, partly that, but remember what Activision Blizzard tried with Call of Duty League and Overwatch League. They tried to turn esports away from the golf tour styles, but I know that's probably not the best analogy to look, but into a more traditional sports league, like with a regular season and playoffs. And in many respects, some of that culture is going into traditional sports now, with the NBA thinking about mid-season tournaments and them experimenting with end of season play-in before the playoffs. So there's a part of me wondering, okay, what part could there be a change coming to that model to go back to something a little bit more traditional for esports? Or will they try and maintain this league format? But having said all of that, it starts to make me think about the bigger picture of this deal and a reminder of the risk Microsoft is taking. CNN Bloomberg, the Bloomberg Canada website, put up an opinion piece by Tae Kim talking about some of that risk. And yeah, while we're talking about IPs that are massive, lately they've struggled. The latest Call of Duty hasn't done well. Overwatch 2 is in purgatory, although they'll use a what is it? Not really a beta, but they'll use an early release version for Overwatch League in the coming year. Well, not one that everyone else will get to use, and not one that really the pros can extensively level up on and really practice on. And the list goes on. And that's before we get to the sexual harassment scandals.
And that's why they got the discount too.
You think that's a discount?
Yeah, this is a discount. Like, I think there was some value shaved off, and that's why I think they did the quick strike.
You
Because
think so? You thought we could have gone
this was,
north of 70 bill?
I think this was opportunism. I also think it is
Well,
the fact that they're
it's,
trying to use this for Game Pass. I think this is the play, just like with Bethesda, that they're trying to grow for
basically
Game Pass and get certain IPs, and then because they see the future in this metaverse and in this multi-pronged device through the Game Pass, and that they're talking about users. Well, Nintendo and Sony and all that, they're talking about units sold. Microsoft has just given up on that and said we're talking about our users and our subscriptions and so on and so forth.
and
They've
in
been moving
turn,
to more Netflix on the game side.
in turn, the community and their stake in the metaverse, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's where it seems they're going and stuff like that, and where Phil Spencer has set them up to a degree. The other question is going to be that Bethesda had their own tech guys and stuff like that. Supposedly, remember Activision Blizzard, especially on the Call of Duty, they had some really good tech. A lot of us didn't play those games and stuff like that, and general public, they were still eating them up to a degree, but there was a lot of tech behind those games that a lot of other game devs would die for and stuff like that. And so now they're going to have to decide, okay, what engines are they going to unify them into one engine for all their engineers and stuff like that? Are we still going to have all these different engines and stuff like that? Because it's not like the others where it's like, okay, are we going to Unity or are we going to Unreal, right? So that'll be
Mhm.
interesting too to see how they get all those cogs to fit because it's not an easy answer. They have like a labyrinth now of studios.
Yeah. So, wow. I'm kind of. There's a lot. As I said, this is just a few of the angles. I think we can end up talking more about this in the future too. Geoff, give me a thought, and then I want to not necessarily move away, but I want to save a few more, some final thoughts too
Yeah.
on this
So,
part of this.
like, first, I feel that calling what happened with Activision Blizzard a sexual assault scandal, there's so much more than that. There's various forms of misogyny and toxic workplace environment, crunch, all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah. Yes.
so there's lots of
They
problems
had
there.
every
Okay.
single thing you
And I
could
did,
think of that you don't want
and
at a company, and they had every single one. And
and to
it's going to be tough to clean that scum off that company, to be honest. I don't think
and
Microsoft will be able to get rid of the stink, to be honest.
and to be clear, when I said those words, I wasn't referring to it as an isolated thing. It had been well known, well documented. This had been long running issues. This had been a culture. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Anything else, Geoff?
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting. I can absolutely recognize, this is the biggest sale of a company in the history of video games. It will have huge ramifications, as long as everything goes through on the gaming landscape. But I also feel that this is the company I am least likely to purchase a console of, purchasing the company I am least likely to play a game from. I had a look at the entire Activision Blizzard back catalog, and the most recent game from that company I have played is 2010's Transformers War for Cybertron. Um,
Oh, you didn't
I
even do like the
Wow.
Blizzard arcade collection they had last year, whatever, which had Lost Vikings
the
and Rock and Roll Racing.
the last Blizzard game I played was Warcraft 3, whatever the first expansion pass was, or expansion pack. I think that, this, again, I know how big this is sort of intellectually and because I follow the news, but, I have been a Nintendo Sega person. I have, you know, I currently own a Switch. I have two very underpowered computers that help me play indie games that come out on Switch too late or don't come on Switch, or I can get for free thanks to Epic. So the types of games I'm interested in, they're not going to be exclusive to Xbox. So like this is a huge purchase. It's I find it interesting that it aside from the like ripple effects, maybe, and that's a huge maybe, this will mean nothing to me. This will not affect Zelda or Splatoon or Danganronpa or if they make another Celeste or Undertale Deltarune. And I'm not, and I guess I'm saying that a little bit because, I guess to bring it back to Japan, but, and kind of not, like Deltarune's American made, but, um, I guess there's some indie studios buried in Activision that I guess maybe I might be interested in, and certainly within Microsoft, they've bought indie studios that I'm interested in. But eventually, a lot of those are probably going to end up on Switch, and a lot of those indie games, my poor underpowered Surface Pro and Intel Nuke can probably handle. So it's kind of been interesting to see like the biggest news of the week when it comes to pop culture, and it almost feels to me like, oh, the Toronto Blue Jays bought the Expos license or the NFL junior team. Like it's so alien to me in some ways, despite the fact that there's I understand Warcraft, I understand the name Overwatch, I've heard of these things, but Call of Duty, like everyone always says COD, and I think of the deep sea fish that is, popular.
They mine cod from actual salt mines there, Geoff?
and it probably tastes really good too.
Yeah, so I just wanted to like bring up that like it's kind of wild to me that this huge thing is happening in I wouldn't call myself like a huge gamer, but in a sort of sphere that I tiptoe in and exist in to some degree and clearly observe and am interested in, but like this probably won't affect me at all. It's very weird to experience that.
Yeah, it's interesting when you
Mhm.
say that, Geoff, because a
Well, it's the
lot
first
of us, I think we've gravitated away from those AAA titles that are from, say, for example, Ubisoft and Activision and all that, that they've grown into these things that they make the same game and they've got their certain set of, okay, this is our movement, this is our whatever, but then the good thing about digital with the rise of indies is a lot of these small teams grew up around the same time as us in the NES, SNES, and all that era, and they gobbled up some of those games and they learned those lessons through osmosis. Like we know how we want things a certain way, and they're able to bring those games to life. They're able to say, take that technology, and we're not going to use always the limitations, but what we saw in our mind, right, on the screen, they're able to bring that out to us. I think about Shovel Knight and stuff like that. And yes, it wasn't exactly something that would work on the NES, but it's what you imagined in your childlike mind was going on that screen. And they had the DNA and the language that we all spoke kind of at that time when we played the Sega and Nintendo games.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so many indie studios are doing things like that, which I think is great. Like, Toby Fox with Undertale and Deltarune, taking Earthbound, but then having Bullet Hell as the battle system, I think is very creative. And then, everything else that those games do. So I think that's fantastic. But yeah, even thinking about it, like I chose Rock Band over Guitar Hero, and I would much rather a home Guitar Freaks that will never happen, or Gitadora as it's now called. But yeah, like with it is so cool with these indie studios, and I hope that, I mean, again, I have computers that can probably run a lot of them, but I hope that Microsoft doesn't buy all of them. Uh,
I don't think they will, but as we know, this is the other thing that they talked about and that there is worry is that some other companies, maybe Sony, maybe others, are going to be now looking afield and maybe wanting to buy other things. And they're like, is Japan going to be in the sights? Is someone going to want to buy a Konami or a Capcom or something like that? Is
and
Tencent going
it's
to be on the lookout too as well? It's like, even with Konami, people could say, well, whatever, but they still have, I think, some value. And who knows if the right partner came for that one, I hope, but you never know, right? Would they
And
keep on
if
making those games? And would they make the Hudson Soft games is the real question. Because Konami gobbled up Hudson Soft over a decade and destroyed that IP,
they
except
made
for the main ones.
Bomberman R.
There are some great games. Well, they did make the PC Engine Mini too. I can't fault them for that. It's like,
The
Okay,
one concern that
that's
I
fine.
heard is that if you know that this sort of has ripple effects for the Japanese companies, like I don't play the game, but I would feel kind of bad for Nintendo if Sony bought Capcom and then Monster Hunter, which is now thriving on Switch, you know, only PlayStation, um, and yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting to see if there are Japanese company ripple effects because I don't know if they'll react in the same way because nothing will compare to the purchase of Activision Blizzard. So I feel like any purchase that is made is going to be sort of reactionary and not really as really a competition, just sort of posturing and saying, "Ooh, we can buy companies too."
yeah, no, I don't think we'll ever see a price like 68 point was it $68.7 billion again? Let me check that bloody number. Yeah, 68.7 billion. We're never going to see that number ever again. And remember, it was Activision, Blizzard, and King. So they had consolidated how many times and done it. And then this was like, quote unquote, I would say the final consolidation. No one could buy that company but Microsoft or a big, massive megacorp. It's just boggles
Okay,
the mind, but I don't think we'll ever see anything like it again.
Plus,
And
so
plus, this isn't like a done deal. It still has to go through all like FEC and
I think it'll go through though.
I'm
Like
not
I
worried
think
about
Bethesda ZeniMax is the guide. I think it'll be a longer tenure, like a year or two, but I think somehow it's gonna get through. I hate to
that.
tell you.
I know, I'm pretty sure too.
But it was funny too. Like I'd say this caps off because remember Phil Spencer and them they've been celebrating Xbox the past year last year because 20 years, right? And they've been going through their history and stuff like that. And I guess this kind of caps it off. But the one thing I think about, and they had started talking about that we never heard before, is remember about them trying to buy Nintendo and Bill Gates, and there's like, let's go and enter the video game industry. And one of their things was saying, well, we could either buy Sega or Nintendo or whatever. And supposedly Nintendo of America took that meeting just to laugh at Microsoft executives for trying to buy them. And you think about that because of tail end of the N64 era, and they were a bit on the downturn, but you never know how these things will turn out, right? Because we raised their sales. They went down with the Wii U, and then Switch raised them again. So they're their own
Okay,
chip, and that's something you always need in the
well,
video
still,
game industry.
Kevin, do you want to say anything?
My opinions are largely similar to Jeff's. Like I played Spyro and Crash Bandicoot and Call of Duty back in high school and in middle school. And in the case of the first two series in elementary school, I don't really play AAA games anymore either for the most part. Not the not the ones that like everyone plays. Like I never really enjoyed playing the sports games. Like NHL was kind of fun, but largely didn't play those. I played Call of Duty up until I want to say the first Black Ops or maybe Modern Warfare 2, and then that was about it because uh, the crowd that I was hanging out with in university and college largely didn't play those games. Yeah, I'd say it really doesn't affect me all that much either because I'm predominantly a Nintendo person now as well. Like I was always handheld with Nintendo and uh my home console was normally Sony, so I did have a PS3, but then my gaming habits changed, so then I just didn't really play home console stuff anymore until the Switch, which, you can play portably. So, yeah, it doesn't really bother me or affect me all that much. It's pretty interesting to see, and Microsoft has been on that buying spree for quite a while now. So I'd say I was a little surprised that they bought such a big company, but also at the same time not that surprised because of all the events that were going on with Activision Blizzard.
But it definitely looks like they're pushing forward in gaming in ways that I don't think we ever envisioned. And it's going to be harder, I think, to buy a physical game and play it on a console and stuff like that. It feels like we're getting closer to that point. It's like, how many more console generations do we actually think we're going to have now? Because now I feel like we're getting closer to that end game where it's not going to change as much as we think and stuff like that.
Yeah. I rue the
It's an
day when that
interesting.
happens.
And I know that it'll be interesting for those smaller players like Limited Run and stuff like that, how it's going to affect them and other companies. And I'm sure others are looking at, we know GameStop and that have been worried about it for many years now. And so it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out for everyone. Like there's going to be a lot of ripple effects that will affect us. It's just we don't know how it's going to happen. It's going to be years down the line. It's not going to be immediate. It's like we're talking 5-10 years.
I think it will
Can we
still take quite
say
a while. Like, I still get this prevailing sense that people want to buy physical games still. Like, yes, you definitely have a core segment of people that will only play digital now, but I still feel like if people want a PS5, I see more people lean towards buying a one that plays both digital and physical.
okay? So can we save a word for a couple minutes for my now worthless PS5?
Did
Why
you
would it be
finally
worthless?
throw it into the snowbank like I suggested?
Mike,
Well,
why do you say worthless? You could easily get your money back if you sell it right now.
I hate to tell you, Kevin, it crashed. It was like the NFTs
well,
of old. It just crashed
on
the
that
market. All those scalpers, they just lost their shirt.
on that note,
Okay, there.
no, but on that note, Sony's shares dropped, I think, 10% on that news. I don't know if it's recovered over the as the rest of the week wore on, but I know the stock markets did take an overall hit.
Yeah, a lot of
I'm
things dropped this week.
Yeah,
Yes,
Saw
things
my
ebb and
portfolio.
flow. So
and roll this into the whole idea that that Netflix's stock also bombed 20% after their subscription outlook was painted not to be rosy.
It's actually pretty funny because like they missed it by not that much, but they still missed it, and everyone just like lost their shit over it.
Yeah, and this is the and this may or may not be related to the Microsoft Activision Blizzard news, but people seem to be losing their shit, so to speak.
probably
Like
multiple
it's a
reasons.
bunch
It's just all small parts, and I'm sure that
it's
was
all
a small
small
print.
parts, but it was fascinating to see all that as it came to a head this week.
It's okay. The stock
As you
market's on
know, it
sale.
goes up and down. It'll come back up, slowly but surely.
Yeah, it's just this is the peaks and valleys, the roller coaster ride. Use whatever cliche you
Buy
want.
low, sell high.
Yeah,
How the world
that's
works.
where we are. So, yeah, but I ain't selling that PS5.
Good.
I think
Because
that's yeah. I think that's good, and I feel that any changes at all with this Microsoft deal are a year away, possibly two. I think that any contracts that are in place are going to be honored, and I think that even past that, I feel that the significant changes won't be felt for a while. And I feel that the overall sentiment, I think that the PS5 has so much like weird momentum. I mean, all the current gen consoles do. Um, I think that it's still going to be relatively popular. Like I don't. Again, as I've
well,
established,
you sort of
I'm not a COD type and sports game type player,
you
but I don't think this is going to completely shatter the console war.
I don't think I don't think it's even going to come close to shattering Sony. There over the last the week wore on, and the reaction from the Sony end, or at least of fans of Sony has lost the video game wars. I think some of the reaction in Japan felt like the sky was falling. Sony hasn't been like Sony's been a player in the video game world for roughly 30, a little over 25 years, right? Like they're not the most established. Like they've established, yes, they're at the top, arguably. Sony, obviously, Microsoft wants to change that, but Nintendo has decades more experience ahead of them.
And they've had peaks and valleys as well, just like
Valleys
all of them and stuff like that. But
it's fascinating to me because remember over the pandemic series, we talked about what Sony thinking for the future and the established fourth pillar, so to speak. That's the center of this podcast and the center of the universe of our fandom. And I'm wondering how this ultimately affects, the video game business for Sony. Where and what point? But keep in mind, the anime component to all of this is very much tied into it as well. And this is the part of the story that I will be fascinated to watch. Because maybe we can dismiss it right now and say maybe it won't, because we're dismissing it. They're dismissing the impact on Sony. Yes, the game is now afoot for Sony. But they can still play. We can speculate as to, okay, well, what will their reactionary move be? There had been that long-standing rumor that Sega is for sale. Could have been bought by Microsoft sometime last year. I think, is that the story? Is that the story as I remember it?
I don't remember that, but you never know. Anything is for sale, right? If
right,
they don't exactly have for sale signs out on their front lawns, unfortunately. So you never know.
And for what it's worth, just to Geoff's point and his thoughts from earlier, the only property within Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard, Bethesda, name Rare, etc., that may have any remote interest to me right now that I can think of is Deathloop, and that's there on the PS5 because of the obligations to keep it there. So, as I said, the game's afoot.
They definitely still have obligations, but they definitely, with Phil Spencer, in that they seem to have left Bethesda, ZeniMax, ID Soft, and stuff like that to do their own thing. But it'll be interesting in the long game to see how these things pan out, and it'll probably be the same with this acquisition as well for Activision.
Yeah, but it's just it's just gotten more competitive, but for some strange reason, I just don't.
I think it's going to be more on the streaming side, and we'll see, because I think they're going to get the contracts in and say they're going to have certain timed exclusivity for their streaming platforms like Game Pass and stuff like that, versus what Sony's going to do. Because remember, we talked about Sony and them launching their own thing in the summer, and that they talked about PS1, PS2, PS3, and certain things in different tiers, right? So we talked about, well, I think it was a brief mention, but Netflix, their prices went up, right? So I would say prices are going up in gaming if they're going down this route too, and they're going to have some interesting tiers. It'll be interesting to see what those tiers are for both of them, Microsoft and Sony.
Well, they went up on, they at least went up on a lot of physical media this generation, did they not?
Well, with inflation, not really so much. And hey, remember when we were buying cartridges for SNES games and even some NES games for over $100 Canadian back in the 90s?
Touché.
And that was before tax. So we've seen worse.
But okay, do we save a word now for, okay, the other parts that could get affected. The actual movie streaming. We talked about Netflix. Mo, you had a thought on Netflix. Or do you want to share, or should we just leave that for now? Because boy, that could get that gets too tangential from this point. So, well, this is obviously this story is developing, and as I said, the Sony angle is still fascinating to me. And for what it's worth, I at least opened the box on the PS5 earlier, so the Spider-Man challenge is off.
So was there a PS5 in the box, Mike? That's the question.
Otherwise, Walmart and I will have a big issue.
Well, you've heard about that, right? I would be scared. I would be opening that box to make sure I have what I want in there. You know what I mean?
Plenty of uses for bricks.
I was thinking rocks. But anyway.
Okay.
Bricks would be too much
but
effort.
you know, I feel like when it comes to the whole Sony versus Microsoft thing, like, I think it kind of levels the playing field in a way, because I always felt like Sony had the stronger IP when it came between the two companies, because Sony has Uncharted, Sony has, well, Horizon was exclusive, but not anymore. Sony,
Last of Us.
like, because Sony
Really
owns all those studios, right? Like God of War, for example, that's another big AAA game that's only on the PlayStation because they own the studio.
And some of them, they're great games, but I'm not sure about you guys, but sometimes it feels samey to me when I see some of those big Sony third-party games, right? That are from outside Japan.
Sorta. But then there's also those other games where, like, a lot of those Japanese developer games also, more often than not, stick to the PS5 or PS5 plus the Switch, and they don't go on the Xbox because, you know, the Xbox doesn't sell in Japan. Or
Is that correct? Or
Like anime, the home country is the first look.
Like that's the interesting part, and that's still like that's part of the story to me.
And
The anime.
it comes
It's
back,
still
actually, Mike.
about the anime fan too, for us. Sorry, James.
I was thinking it comes back, actually, because when you look at Japan, they don't have what I'd say now is true AAA development. They have some places like Capcom and even some parts of Konami and some other ones that can make some really great games, but it takes a while to get that AAA game out there. A lot of the developers now that we used to love and know, some of them got gobbled up like Hudson Soft, but other ones like Falcom, for example, they're like, I guess, more double A type games, like they're almost in the indie sphere, so to speak. And a lot of them, I don't think they're looking at the PS5 because that's so many more resources to put to a game and stuff like that. And some of them are coming around from making their own engines and stuff like that to looking at Unity and Unreal now, which hopefully will help them out going to those future consoles and stuff like that, because there's so much power and so many things going behind it. But Falcom, which of course started PC, and then once the PSP and that went to Sony exclusive with PSP and now PS4, but their most recent internal project is a remake of Tales game, and it's going to be them doing it for Switch, and they're also going to do it for PS4 and stuff like that. But that's a tell if they're going to remake a game for the Switch. I think this is a test run, and because, as we said, Switch is hot in Japan and stuff like that, and it'll help them to actually make games for that and probably whatever the next Switch successor is, because I don't think it'll be as powerful as that PS5 or that Xbox Series X. And they'll be able to hit that market, right? The whole market, and they won't have to spend all those development resources because it's intensive now. Like, it's crazy.
It's interesting, but when you say all of this, it sort of reminds me about the quirk of a Nintendo system. It doesn't have to be the most technologically advanced. It just has to have a certain quirk that's able to hit a lot of different notes. The power of the Game Boy back then.
Case in point of a AAA game that just takes so long to make in Japan, Final Fantasy.
That's where we are.
And look at that remake of 7. How much of that game did you actually get?
Something like a third of the game.
At best. Anyway.
Oh.
I was going to say that now, Mike, are we going to talk about, we might have all our big stories for 2022 all in this 1 month, but I heard that there was more this week about the story of our lives on the internet, i.e. NFTs again.
Okay, so we have maybe at most roughly 20 minutes to go, I think. The Project Anime story was still interesting to me, but we can't possibly go there now, at least this week. So
why not?
Let's start. Well, because then that's another long talk.
Does it really need to be that long? Like, it'll be old. It's already kind of old news anyway.
Okay, so where do you want to go? Well, we'll roll the NFT thought. I'm sure into this. What parts of the Project Anime predictions do you want to just cue in on for a couple minutes? Just one thing each around the table.
The cinema thing was pretty cool. I mean, it makes sense. Just like with Anime North, I feel like once things open back up, there's going to be an over enthusiastic amount of people that would want to see stuff on the big screen.
Okay. Geoff, Kevin, you want to offer a thought that grabbed your attention in reading that article? If you did.
I guess the main thought I have is how similar it seemed to last year, like, and how nothing really did jump out really loudly. There were some interesting, points brought up, but especially when it comes to like, what I've repeatedly been interested in, and with that being, multi or different countries collaboration. I think that was brought up a little bit again, not quite as loudly as last year, but different adaptations. What is the future of that? So that was brought up a bit. So I'm always curious about that, but I didn't need these analysts stuff to talk about it. It's what I'm interested in anyway.
Kevin?
The Korean Manhwan webcomics breakthrough bit was interesting.
Do you think that could actually happen? Because we've seen how Mawa has done before, Kevin. It's like we have seen certain segments of Korean culture make the breakthrough, but I'm still not sure about Mawa. You know what I mean? In certain animation.
It just needs one good adaptation, because apparently the last batch of adaptations were so-so. Like, yeah, people watch God of High School and Tower of God because Crunchyroll advertised them heavily, but then it didn't seem like they were huge hits in the same way as, say, a Jujutsu Kaisen. There's definitely a lot more manhwa readers now than before, and we're slowly getting more of those popular manhwa out because you have titles like Solo Leveling coming out in English now. So, like I said, these are predictions, right?
So you
I think
think
it's possible.
maybe Yen Press might take another bite at the apple, because remember they brought in, oh, I forget her name, but remember she did Mawa and stuff like that in print, and then they bought out that one publisher, and they started their own Mawa and stuff like that when Yen Press started, and it just kind of petered out, so to speak. So it makes you wonder if they could revive that again.
I'm also curious
Ernie?
with the whole Disney and anime thing, because in Japan they did acquire some titles to put on Disney Plus.
So this is a put up or shut up moment for them.
Well, I think it's going to be a slow boil on that one
Yeah.
for Disney, but we'll see.
So
how it
you don't
goes.
think the whole story will play itself out in 2022, do you, James?
No, but I am intrigued on the continuing development, as I said before, of audiobooks. And we have seen, especially from Yen Press trumpeting them, we've seen some of them come out. Like, I know I would be excited to listen to Tanya the Evil, and I know Monica Riel is doing the reading of that one. So they have been going to dubbing studios that have had, like, I guess, anime adaptations and stuff like that, and getting some of the voice actors to do the readings for some of these books. And it's been slow to build up, but hopefully it comes through. And then we also saw that last year, and it's starting to come out, is the first three Vampire Hunter D audiobooks. And hopefully maybe that gives some new life to that, because it's been a slow release for Dark Horse on that. But they're only at, I think, 20 or 22 or 23 or 24 volumes. And that guy just keeps on writing. But but that one would be the one that would be more to the mainstream, I feel, for Vampire Hunter D compared to the others. So that'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
The only two things, just to follow up on both Kevin and James's thoughts, that I want to bring up before I go to my own. When Kevin talked about the Korean part of the equation, I can't help but think about the Wattpad purchase we talked about last year, and the integration with Webtoons, because maybe that's another step that is in the line of that thing last year. When it comes to James's thoughts on audiobooks becoming a thing, in many respects, this is maybe almost the evolution of things that is culturally built into Japanese entertainment consumption. I've always said that spoken word, the drama play, was always a thing there. Radio, spoken word radio, drama plays, radio dramas, I think that's the word I was looking for. That's always been a thing in Japan. It pretty much died off here in North America. But that the concepts, pretty much, as far as I know, have still existed in Japan. And in many ways, this is bringing it, like, this is almost bringing those properties, those concepts here, which is one of those, well, there's a lot of things that have been coming to Japan that other segments resisted, other segments in the West resisted, but as time has gone and maybe youth have grown into the target market, and have embraced it, it's become more accepted. So James pointing that out, and whoever the analyst was, I forgot who it was, wanting to point that out, is a keen thought to me.
And then we have Audible.
Yes, and then we have Audible too. So, but the thing is, and yes, we have Audible. So why not latch on to the parts of that culture that has already worked in the West? To me, the big thought, the big one that stuck out to me is the China question.
And I had mentioned that before because it's a fickle country, as we know, with Winnie the Pooh there, and it may be able to get in there and get their money or sow their seeds, but if they decide that it's not going to happen and they close the gates, right? Like, it affects them and it affects those companies in China, just like Tencent. That's why they're looking outside their borders, because they never know, right?
The way Roland Keltz quickly termed it. It feels like it's China wanting to have its cake and eat it too. But it's a question that you guys know I've always held an interest in, and I've always wanted to talk to people a little bit more in the know of that part of the story. And to that end, there's still a guest, that Miss Michi, who did who's done a couple panels for the Anime North online shows. And we have endeavored to have her come on the show. She has long agreed. We just have to be able to, get our schedules to work out. But she is somebody I know we could talk to on this subject in the future. So stay tuned for that. But okay, that was good. Hey, nice work. Actually, we got through that article pretty good.
And they talked
Okay,
about NFTs in there, and that was...
what's your NFT? Okay, give me your NFT thought as we start to wind it down.
Well,
Just
supposedly Shonen Jump, as we know, on the 18th had a big announcement. And being 2022, everyone's like, it's NFTs. And the funny part of it is, I think, was it you, Geoff, that said it was a tense? How many hours was it? 2 hours? 3 hours?
Yeah, it was very quick.
But I'm thinking, so they did a tweet reply, which is incredible to think they did that. So obviously, the person running the Shonen Jump USA Twitter is a nice person, and said, no, it's not NFTs. And then the response to that was just ridiculous, where it became their most liked tweet for Shonen Jump USA. And think about that. They've probably been on there for a while, and you think of the properties, and that's their most liked tweet ever.
Hell yeah.
So I was relieved, and I'm not even a Shonen Jump subscriber. I mean, I used to be when it was a physical magazine. But like I was right there with Jesse Bredrich in the sense that I wanted to cancel my subscription if it was NFTs, and I didn't even have a subscription. And it was so
5,000 likes. Way to go, Jesse.
It was so funny to me when the result or the answer to this mystery was T-shirts.
Well, it was Shonen Jump. Let's go back to the story. It was an official U.S. Shonen Jump store. That's basically what it is. Selling, like, as you said, different merchandise, T-shirts and things like that. Kind of like last year, at the end of last year, when Atlas launched their own store, right, to sell merch and stuff like that. So,
and like that's all well and good, but like Uniqlo and Hot Topic have, you know, My Hero Academia and
question mark.
Bleach
So it's like, how
shirts.
exclusive is it? Is the question, right?
What's the point?
I mean, it'll be different designs.
Unless they're willing to end their collaboration with Uniqlo.
I do think that there's an opportunity for them to offer more unique products and like print on demand. Because if you're in a Hot Topic or even Uniqlo or something, you can't post or you can't like try to sell fringe products because they're not going to sell. So like if you look at when Uniqlo has had Pokemon promotions, it's the most popular Pokemon. So it's your starters and maybe your Gengar, Snorlax, Lucario type of things. But if you go on the Pokemon Center website, the products are a lot more varied. You have the custom Pokemon shirts that are like $200 that have not any Pokemon you want, but you can, you know, get a Doduo or a Dunsparce shirt if you want. Or like plushies of, you know, Nidoran male or, you know, Shellos North or East or whatever it is. Yeah, exactly, right? So I think that based off of what I've seen from, say, Sega's store, like if you go to Walmart or Target in the US and you're looking for like a Sonic the Hedgehog shirt, you can find Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, no problem. You go to Sega of America's online shop, you can find Big the Cat and Rouge the Bat. Like, I think that this is an opportunity for Shonen Jump to do that, or to do designs that might be a little bit more unique or air quotes mature. So I think that there is a possibility of it having a purpose. But I don't know, Uniqlo's shirts tend to be pretty artsy, so I don't know.
And I guess it's engaging with the community. You mentioned Sega, and I think that helped Atlas launch their store and stuff like that, probably the same backbone and stuff like that. And they went after, I guess, Persona first, and now they're asking, it's like, hey, what do you guys want? Like, are you okay with Catherine and all these others? And they said, what type of products do you want? Do you want as a t-shirt, as a cup, and so on and so forth? So they're looking at different special things to give you, right?
Or in the case of Catherine, mouse pads.
Oh, those exist. Come on. Those have to exist somewhere.
And we've seen it too, obviously. NISA, they had their store and they were doing games, but they've even went into merch and stuff like that. And even the Falcom stuff they've teamed up with they've been doing merch and stuff like that. Like the first Crossbell game, Trails to Zero, they have the special edition, and now they got merch alongside if you want to show your fandom, I guess.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, who knows what else to add there.
Well, I can't
Can
tell you that if in 10 years I'm not able to buy on the official Shonen Jump USA site a t-shirt of Goku in NFT form, I will not be happy.
So just a hexagon Twitter icon of a shirt.
I'm just thinking there's some contradictory terms there. Okay, before we go, last thing I want to bring up, and let's talk Sega, but more specifically about two properties that are about to get adaptations, or at least one will come out this week, and then one that's being worked on.
Sonic Movie 2 coming in April. Oh boy.
Not yet, but I was thinking more Shenmue and Judgment. Which one do you want to tackle just quickly? Shenmue is announced for February 5th.
And I think Judgment was live action, right? And that was more in Japan. Well, but I think the bigger one...
That one... Okay, let's talk Shenmue for a second, and then we'll talk...
But I was thinking, yeah, Shenmue is the more interesting one. So that was a Crunchyroll Adult Swim collaboration before they got picked up by Sony. So I think this is the last one, but they had Fina Pirate Princess, and then the one they're doing now with Blade Runner. And now they have Shenmue, which is supposedly going to happen starting in February. And it's been interesting. Like, this is where we thought it was going to go with these collaborations. It'd be interesting to see how they did. But Shenmue's interesting that we saw the trailer, and it was interesting. They did have the forklifts in there, so we will get forklift action. And then the other interesting thing is on the dub side, because they're not going to have the dub actors in English from the game, and different people had different things to say about that when we had Shenmue 3, but it definitely, I guess, probably would not work out exactly as we probably would hope in a nostalgia way for an anime, but they actually didn't even go to, say, NYAV Post or to someone in California. They actually went to Sentai. So Sentai is going to be dubbing this for them, so that'll be interesting on the dub side to see how that goes.
The takeaway I got from that is it doesn't sound like any of the original music from the video game featured in it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
That was one of the things I really loved about the original game. Just my opinion on that.
And I guess the other question is, how much are they going to adapt? Is it just going to be the Yokohama arc?
Good question.
Or are they going to get to Hong Kong? I don't know.
Probably. It looks like, at least that looks like the intention down the road.
I found it interesting that all the marketing for Scott Pilgrim was that it's an anime, but for Shenmue, it's Shenmue the animation. It might not be any production in Japan at all, but it's a Japanese property, Japanese characters. I just found that interesting that the American or Canadian indie comic about Canadians is being marketed as an anime, and this one is being marketed as the animation.
Well, we're talking also two different companies with two different marketing strategies, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they got Telecom Animation Films doing animation production, so they definitely have the Japanese content, and definitely Crunchyroll on their site when they were announcing everything. They definitely had the Japanese voice actors and everything else front and center and stuff like that. It was just when you saw the English one, it's like the names, and you're looking and you're like, they don't say Sentai explicitly, but when you look at the English cast list, it's like, oh, they're dubbing this at Sentai.
Yeah, and I know plenty of Japanese, productions have had the animation as a subtitle. I just thought it was kind of funny.
A lot of video games too, right? So.
And finally, last thing, and Judgment. On to Judgment. It sounds like there's going to be a live action of that. And out of all people to be starring in it, Takuya Kimura is being tapped for the lead, which makes sense considering it's his likeness in the main character anyway. But remember, there was this talk late last year, or around the time Lost Judgment came out, that this could be the last game in the Judgment series. because was it Johnny's?
Yeah, it was Johnny's, I believe. So that's
And
why
you
it
did
adds a
not
little
like
intrigue, doesn't it?
That's what adds a lot of intrigue. So I want to end on a single yes or no. TK's involvement in this live action project all but confirms that there will be another game in the Judgment series.
I can't say yes
Maybe.
or no. I think there will be another game, but with him involved, probably not.
Yeah, I like yeah, but that's the wrinkle in this story that just grabbed my attention. That all said, on the topic of properties on Sony games, Yakuza is still there. Yakuza will probably be front and center as the PlayStation 5 is opened up. And yeah, I get it. It's a PS4 game.
And they have brought, remember, to Xbox and stuff like that. I believe it is on Game Pass and stuff like that. So they definitely have
So,
grown it, which is great to see. And I think it's the Atlas Sega partnership again. It's great to see how that grew from that.
mm-hmm.
I think Kevin has some.
Oh,
One last
well,
thought?
I'm just looking at well, it's not pertaining to your topic. I was just browsing through the Shonen Jump store. Yeah, these are okay. The Bleach the Bleach stuff's kind of interesting. Like the purple, there's that purplish Ichigo hoodie that's kind of neat, and there's another Ichigo like white sweatshirt that's actually a cool design, but the One Piece stuff is kind of meh. Not very.
Yeah,
It's just very. It's just very simple. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's.
I
don't
mean,
know. They gotta. Maybe they're limited to how they can design it. I don't know, but like,
well, we've
if
had
that
those.
thing is $40, if that T-shirt's $40, it better be like from a good like factory, which I don't know if it would be.
Well, to be fair to them, they'll be able to use, Demon Slayer stuff, right? Right?
Yeah, they could.
Right?
I feel like they would at some point or another. It's just
Because
I
of
feel
all
like
the talk about them calling copyright on Demon Slayer designs.
Are they going to be able to use the
Shueisha
Nezuko
doing that.
transformation that supposedly some people on the western side of Twitter got offended by?
Just saying. That's what just... Anyway.
Well, they're clearly trying to play into the whole drop culture that's prevalent in streetwear now, where, oh, well, we're only going to make so many, and when they're gone, they're gone. They're trying to, use that mindset to try and get people to buy stuff, but then the stuff has to be good.
You just can't put a face on a t-shirt, that's for sure. But
you want to play on FOMO emotions, right?
Yeah, and
kind of like me browsing through the PlayStation store during the holiday sale. Anyway,
it just feels very basic for most of these products.
So maybe just wait for the Uniqlo drop.
I guess
well, even the Uniqlo stuff's not that great, honestly. Design-wise, the Uniqlo collab stuff is very average for the most part.
Yeah, well, let me take a look at that after we're done. Okay.
But if they can be like the Atlas store and maybe the Sega store and some of those other ones and do a bit more questions to the audience and stuff like that and give them a few more months, maybe they'll get better designs. But I guess they're also hamstrung because they have to get those approved by the higher ups in Japan too, right?
That's the thing. Yeah, like it depends. You would really want someone who is an actual designer to be on board here to make stuff that can be more visually striking. Like, I look at the collaboration between a streetwear brand named Undercover and the Evangelion collab that they did this fall, and some of that stuff looks pretty cool. Even if most of that stuff isn't very wearable, there are some pretty like out there designs that Jun Takahashi incorporated into his coats and his jackets, using some of the like Avas as a backdrop, like if I like link you some of that stuff, you'll see a clear difference in terms of like design ethos in that sense.
Yeah, the
Well,
Ava
send me
stuff
the
was
link and
really interesting. I remember seeing it, and I
send
wouldn't
me the
wear
link.
it, but it looked cool. I agree. It definitely had more of a look than what you're seeing in the generic stuff that probably was on the Shonen Jump USA site at the moment, and even some other sites, right?
Right. Well, send me the link. Okay.
Sure.
Anyway, because now you have my curiosity just to see what these look like. Anyway, that's all we got for tonight. So first time watching or listening, well, especially first time listening, once again, here's where you can contact us. animeroundtable@gmail.com, at animeroundtable@animeroundtable.com. And don't forget, we are on Twitch, twitch.tv/anime roundtable, and on YouTube, with the intention of more stuff to come in the future there. And as for this podcast, don't forget to give us a review wherever you're enjoying this, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and the like, because reviews will always help get us noticed. What type of reviews are we looking for?
5-star ones.
Well, kept it simple this time, didn't you, Kevin?
Yes, I did.
Throughout the pandemic series, we had been trying to do regular episodes every other week, but as you probably have now guessed, we're going to try and do something on an almost weekly basis. Whether it be on a podcast or on Twitch or on YouTube. Regardless, try to keep we're going to try and add new stuff wherever we can. So hit the subscribe or follow button on all of the platforms we're on so you can be notified whenever we add something new there for your enjoyment. The theme song is entitled Fubuki Snowstorm by Piko Misaki, which was the title track of her newest album. Check out more of her music at picoinfinity.com or on her Facebook page at Pico Zen Music. So until next time, thanks for listening. Good night from Toronto. Join us again for another edition of the Anime Roundtable. Okay, anything? Any last thoughts before I hit the stop button?
Well,
I
that
think
second
Mo was
chapter
gonna
of
say a
Ayakashi
couple
Triangle.
things, but
Mo, did you want to add anything?
yeah, he was interrupted at some point. I felt really bad
Sorry, Mo.
during the Shonen Jump store stuff.
Sorry,
I
Wait,
said,
what was I saying? What shouldn't jump?
oh no, you started to say something, but then you were cut
Oh
off.
yeah, no.
Yeah,
I'm surprised by this. What they're trying to sell here, because this story is not good, bro.
Oh, it must have been
My
when
thoughts
Kevin was
exactly.
looking through the store.
Like,
Okay.
ugh.